Daniverse. Oh man, I don't even know what to say to this one. How did we even get here? Buckle up, folks, because we've got some comic book movie business to take care of. Shazam 2 is absolutely tanked. I'd bet on my own house it's not going to make $200 million worldwide. Reviews aren't great. In fact, they're considerably worse than the first. But that sorely can't be the reason why it's doing as poorly as it has. In fact, how well Shazam is not doing brings up a largely frustrating point for me in regards to Shazam and the greater DC universe as a whole on screen. The movie's quality or lack thereof really has no bearing on it. No, my thing about Shazam 2 is that I don't really like how it's been treated. It's another in a long line of questionable DCEU failures. Aquaman, swim for cover, because your movie is next. Flash, don't worry though, you'll be okay because apparently the bigwigs at Warner's think your movie has potential. It apparently tested well. You know what other movie apparently tested well? Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. Oh wait, that was just with the studio executives. But apparently it was so good a bunch of them broke down in tears. Yeah, I cried when it was over, because how much they slaughtered my boys Batman and Superman. The publicity for Shazam 2 has been, to be blunt, pitiful. And would I be blowing your mind if I told you it's been 4 years since the original Shazam came out? To your average person, that's essentially an eternity. Say what you will about Marvel, but at least they get away with long gaps in between actual sequels, because they built up an audience interest in their characters, through successful crossovers, cameos, and other sources. So say, even though there was a 6-year gap between the original Doctor Strange and the proper follow-up in the Multiverse of Madness, the character has still had a huge public presence, making appearances in the interim in Infinity War, Endgame, and Spider-Man No Way Home. So when people saw there was a new solo Doctor Strange movie, they all went, "Oh yeah, Doctor Strange. I love that guy in Endgame. Let's go see his latest movie. It's gonna rule." But because DC mucked up their own big crossover film so much, they have no way of promoting their own superheroes outside of their own films, and thus Shazam ceases to exist as an actual brand for many people. To give you a comparison of how poorly Fury of the Gods is done, the first Shazam opened to about $53 million back in April 2019. That opening was considered underwhelming for a comic book movie of the time, but not bad for a character that hadn't been really relevant in forever. Want to guess how much the sequel has done in comparison? If you said about over a 50% drop, then congrats, you're correct. The best way I could describe Fury of the Gods opening weekend drop is that it's a massive downgrade. For comparison's sake, let's look at two superhero movie sequels that at the time were seen as underwhelming by most. Not just as movies, but also in terms of how well they performed. Iron Man 1 made $318 million. 2 years later, Iron Man 2 made $312 million. At the time, it was seen as a complete disappointment. Some, even in their melodramatic way of following box office, thought those numbers were an absolute travesty. Drama queens, but hey, if you follow box office like I do, you can really get worked up over the stupidest things that don't even affect your life. It's kind of like something we're proud of. But in retrospect, and with time to show how much better or worse it would get for comic book movies, in terms of how well they might do, it's actually not really that massive of a drop. Really, all it did was go from being the second biggest movie of 2008 to the third biggest movie of 2010. And if we're talking international, then at the time, superhero movies had yet to become massive in non-English language speaking countries. So really, it's a wash at best. Or another example, Batman 1989. The movie was widely regarded as the film that changed things forever, made a then $251 million in 1989, which at the time was regarded as an astonishing large number. Oh, how spoiled people back then were. Batman Returns in 1992, however, even with a larger, again, record-breaking opening weekend, made $162 million, a pretty hefty drop. Batman sold 63 admissions, while Batman Returns admissions was 39 million. Even if the movie still made a lot of money, in terms of turnout, it was nearly slashed in half. That's pretty significant. So for the Shazam sequel to have dropped not just that much in total, but for it to collapse as much as it did on its opening weekend, something has to have gone horribly wrong for it. I mean, think of it this way. The superhero insomniac cure known as Morbius sold considerably more tickets on its opening weekend than Shazam 2 did. In the case of audiences, it's Jared Leto 1, Zachary Levi 0. That's not just a typical comic book movie sequel drop to a movie that was already pretty massive like Iron Man 2 or Batman Returns. No, this is something on the level of an X-Men Dark Phoenix, a movie that came out and just utterly tanked in a way that no other film in the franchise before had. Only in this case, this is Shazam's first sequel. Now that's what I call a bomb. Somehow, Black Adam's performance looks better and better with each passing day. Looks like The Rock did indeed change the hierarchy of the DC Universe, just not in the way he wanted it to. Now, I'm sure we can point to a bunch of reasons why the movie failed. The original Shazam, while seemingly well received, hasn't had much in the way of cultural lasting power. To many people, they see it as a pleasant, if not especially memorable, comic book movie. And the concept as a whole can come off as very childish to the average person. That, and when you try to make it look more serious and epic, it's not that serious and epic, guys. But let's just go along with the idea. You lose the concept of fun that was enjoyable about it in the first place. Maybe it would have done better had WB released the film in December, especially when their own movie slate at the end of last year could literally be described as non-existent. After all, even with the juggernaut that is Avatar: The Way of Water, there's a strong possibility it could have coexisted with it, much like how Puss in Boots 2 did well, and with other big Christmas releases like I Want Somebody to Dance With and Babylon turning out to be no curse at the box office. That could have left a much bigger opening for Shazam 2. However, if inside sources are to be believed, WB was caught up in so much red ink at that point that they couldn't afford to have any movies be released at the end of 2022, leading to Shazam getting pushed to March. Plus, I think what people forget is that sometimes scheduling is intentional, and sometimes it's just throwing darts at things. Beyond specific genres that are or used to be targeted at different demographics, a lot of the time studios are in the dark about what movies break out and when they will break out. So even if WB had magically gotten their stuff in order, and Shazam 2 had been moved to December, who's to say it would have done better? There's still a guarantee that a lot of the issues that are bogging it down right now would have still come into play. It's just that it would have had Christmas legs to help it land a bit better. And even if everything was peachy clean at WB these days, you can't deny they've had a few rough last years. I can't say I envy anyone who has to work at Warner Brothers, David Zaslav or otherwise. This is a company that has absolutely seen better days. Plus, even if I did work at Warner Brothers, I'd say the issues are still the same. I've been seeing this company tossing and turning, trying to get anything off the ground successfully as far as DC is concerned, and constantly flailing and failing for the exact same reasons, each and every time. Rinse and repeat. They tried to copy Marvel, which didn't work, and now they're trying to make their movies more separate from each other. But it has the potential to make things more confusing for audiences, outside of obvious things that are bulletproof for clear success, like the Batman. There's also the Zaslav HBO Max factor. One could take a look at Fury of the Gods and think of it more like a movie to be played on HBO Max, so its theatrical run was really something secondary. Remember, this is the same studio who had marketing geniuses who decided that Magic Mike's Last Dance should be on less than 2,000 screens. And then when they realized their mistakes, they finally put it over 3,000 screens the next weekend. Even though by that point, whatever hype it had, a lot of it, had already started to dry out. Because releasing your movies on the most screens possible should be an immediate priority unless it's an art house thing. And Last Dance's quality may have been a factor in its release. But also, the movie sort of may have been released this way initially as a push for HBO Max. Still, the decision looks, especially in retrospect, kind of baffling. This strange studio decision has come down to how they're selling Shazam 2, and because again, if insiders are to be believed, that combined with the fact that the movie was considered subpar, and WB bleeding so much money, that it has led to the film's rather relatively muted marketing. The level of advertising, especially in comparison to the first, feels far less exciting. Beyond some traditional ads and trailers, there hasn't been much in the way of actual media blitz. They're online trying to sell the movie to people, as they should be, but it feels far less what I would describe as urgent, and it appears more laid back in terms of its approach, which depending on how you look at it, is either good or bad. But if we're making comparisons, the original Shazam also didn't have the most robust marketing campaign. After all, the film was a $100 million superhero film, not a $200 million multi-team epic that Marvel might have done, or say how ridiculous Warner's went for Man of Steel, so it went much more low-key in terms of its overall media existence. This may have led to its relatively weak opening. However, I think the biggest difference between Shazam and Shazam Fury of the Gods is that the executives at Warner Brothers had far more enthusiasm for the first, because the DCEU and that particular brand of superheroes was still a thing that they were heavily invested in. In comparison, Fury of the Gods marketing campaign can best be described as having an obligatory feel of, get it out there. We just have a movie that we need to throw at somebody. There doesn't seem to be any enthusiasm. It's very alarming when you're trying to sell a $100 million plus blockbuster, and you realize before it's too late that you failed to properly give it a strong marketing hook. To be fair, it wouldn't be accurate to say they didn't spend a good amount of money marketing the film. They did. But they, in my opinion, lacked an actual reason for people to see it. If this was Marvel, and they had built up goodwill from making well-received movies, I imagine things would be different. But alas, here we are. Trotting people out at Comic-Con and having them do standard interviews isn't going to be enough to salvage your movie when it's clear you haven't built up any actual interest in people seeing it. The failure of the DCEU has essentially been building up to this low point of an opening. I think it clicked for me beyond bad tracking numbers when I realized Shazam 2 was actually going to tank just a few days before release after a marketing campaign that I would describe as aimless, or not really sure of itself. Suddenly the big TV ads started spoiling things. You see, studios have this thing where if a movie isn't tracking that well, or especially bad, they'll start throwing the entire kitchen sink at it, selling on things that are supposed to be big, oh my god, shocking moments, or cameos or reveals for moviegoers coming in. This extends to all movies, good or bad. They think it'll be a better way to get people into the cinemas, if they know that their favorite character or actor is involved with the film in any form, even if the scene turns out to be like 1 minute at best. So in the case of Shazam 2, there's an argument that things were getting especially dire for it when they started to reveal the big cameo of the movie in the actual TV spots. Oh no! This getting revealed now, doesn't exactly strike me as confidence. But I want to point to a larger idea regarding Shazam Fury of the Gods release. In a way, this movie wasn't always doomed to fail, but because one specific unfortunate circumstances revealed themselves, it was sort of flatlined. We can question the quality of the picture, argue all day about whether people were interested in it or not, but Shazam Fury of the Gods was essentially sent out to die. Being caught in the crossroads of the future and past of the DCU, Shazam 2 is one of those movies that really had little reason to exist. The only reason the first Shazam even got a sequel in the first place, despite the fact that it didn't do spectacular business, is especially because for a superhero movie of its ilk, it was relatively cheap to produce, and wound up becoming one of the more profitable of DC's hits. So even though the DC slate is what I would describe as not great, Shazam stood out among the crowd because it was actually well received. The sequel, Fury of the Gods, was also, if the numbers are to be believed, made relatively cheap as well, with a budget in the $125 million range. This is despite the fact that it is a typical sequel thing of going bigger and having a much larger threat, alongside the fact that there are more recognizable names involved. Shazam Fury of the Gods was, if anything, a mercy kill. It's a leftover from the era of the Snyder regime that has already cleaned house. WB went all out on Black Adam because that movie starred The Rock, but when that movie didn't perform the way they wanted it to, that alongside with the DC announcements basically sent Fury of the Gods into a buried hole that it'll be stuck in permanently. However, the entire thing just ties largely into my frustrations with the development of the DCU as a whole. To say that the DCU is wasted potential is basically the equivalent of saying the sky is blue. Fury of the Gods exemplifies this, because irregardless of how it actually turned out in terms of quality, it should have either been this huge game-changing sequel for this universe, or more of a down-to-earth story just with fun supernatural elements. Instead, here it is being routed out as a massive bomb, a literal write-up, all because its fate is ultimately worthless to larger DC plans as a whole. In the case of Fish vs. Fowl, this movie was definitely a chud. I suppose there's an argument to be made that it ties into people's general fatigue about superhero movies, and while that's probably true to an extent, I mean Marvel's last movie, Ant-Man Quantumania, won't even make $500 million worldwide. Oof! However, in the case of DC, their problems and failures started long before the fatigue was even considered an actual thing, so to use that as an escape crutch would be missing the point entirely. I myself might find elements of Shazam 2 disappointing as an actual theatrical feature, but even I realized they still did an absolute hatchet job when it came to the release of the film. And even if there was a clear lack of interest from audiences, that's on DC/WB's part. It's been proven time and time again that it's possible to make successful films out of characters that no regulars have even actually heard of. You just need to build up the audience's trust and interest in your cinematic universe. Who's to say you can't make a good movie out of Green Lantern, a Flash movie that isn't meant to be the restart of a cinematic universe, or a Shazam movie? Sure, on paper it seems like a daunting and hard task, But if the right screenwriters are involved, and they have enough patience with themselves, they can really deliver a product that's both good, exciting, and fun to watch. Know how I know this? Because they made a good movie out of Shazam already, and guess what it was called? Shazam! Look, I love DC Comics. In fact, I may love DC Comics even more than Marvel, which might come as a genuine surprise to some, even though their heroes are larger than life and not as relatable, which, if I'm being honest, has never been a detraction. I think, if anything, they have stronger concepts and mythologies. That's why I'm very frustrated at the lack of strong representations of said concepts on screen. And even when they do work to any extent, now that there's a huge reboot in the works, it's led to the feeling of everything not being worth it anymore. I remember seeing Green Lantern in 2011 and coming out of the cinemas and going to myself, that could have been much better. And it's been like that for the past 12 years since. Even when a DC film has been good, I'm still left with a feeling of restraint, like something flickering in the back of my mind, that this is maybe not as good as I think it is. It's very alarming how DC's TV department, with less than maybe half of the budget and a bunch of subpar CGI, has managed to successfully translate a lot of its properties much more quietly on TV. Whereas DC films have constantly just floundered and floundered. And yes, movies versus TV is a completely different medium, but it doesn't make it any less astonishing. If you want to know how relatively nonchalant the marketing for Shazam 2 was, WB didn't even give Fury of the Gods a Super Bowl spot, instead reserving things for The Flash, which is clearly the film that they're way more heavily invested in. Maybe The Flash is great, I'd actually like it to be, that'd be a nice surprise. But it doesn't change my initial complaints either, that the studio heads are making some questionable decisions here, and this whole DC enterprise has been nothing but one giant heartbreak. I'd hope that James Gunn's involvement with the future of the DC Universe would lead to bigger, better, and more successful projects for the company. I trust his guiding hand. He's the man who managed to make the Guardians of the Galaxy into A-listers. Plus, the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, one of which he directed and the other he spearheaded, were also great. And he's clearly a huge fan of a lot of DC characters and the properties themselves. For now, though, I just have to wallow in the misery of failures like Shazam, Fury of the Gods, which to me is the ultimate case study on how everything can and has gone wrong for this so-called cinematic universe. It's not even so much the marketing of the films that get on my nerves, it's how they've handled the entire release of Shazam 2. Leaving it out in the cold like that just makes it come off like it's a throwaway, and for a major release, it shouldn't be. The entire handling of this so-called cinematic universe has been one groaner after another. Ultimately, I only hope for the best for the future of DC films, but following them again and again with failed promise after failed promise has at best left me feeling exhausted. And you know what? That's not the best feeling to have. A lot of this video was at first done on the fly and meant to be shorter, but it became more of a general rant about DC movies that just happened to be within the context of a Shazam sequel. It evolved into something that was just a wee bit larger than what it set out to be. I really hope you enjoyed it, and please remember to rate and subscribe, because say the word with me again, Shazam! Anyway, bye!